go on cameras off if anybody's having bandwidth difficulties, and I know that I have regularly. Anybody who's been in my company on Zoom calls of late will know that I regularly have bandwidth difficulties. So if anybody feels to further turn off the cameras or whatever to facilitate that, that's no problem. So I suppose what I want to do is try and use this hour as productively as possible. And what I was going to suggest is that we would take the information that, or the material that was shared, and look at it in terms of just literally taking those questions and giving everybody an opportunity to say something on them quickly, so we kind of go around on each person. But before we do that, can I just ask if anybody has any suggestions? And I know Aileen and Carl and Avian has given me some comments as well, and Owen has obviously sent something through which has been shared with all of you. But has anybody any other questions they think we should be asking, or did it strike anybody, and recognizing that this is a stage of the process rather than the complete process? Are there any other questions people felt we should have on the agenda at this point, that we could just list those, and then we can come back to them as part of the process? Any thoughts, Latian, of any other questions that should have been in this mix?
No, I think a lot of the questions are fairly big and high level questions that I mean, naturally loads of them that fall out, but if we were able to get through a fraction of those, we'd be very lucky.
Okay.
I don't think you can get bigger than who are we and what are we doing. So
yeah. Okay. So we're good then to crack on with that.
Yeah.
Okay. So the first question, and what I suggest doing here is that we literally we kind of go around about, and I look at the faces, I have them here, so I don't know if this is done in alphabetical order or how it is, but Carl, you're first, and then David, then Martina, Morwenna, Florence, Owen, Jay. So that's the way they're coming up on my screen. So what I was going to suggest is literally we look at the questions as they rise here, get a quick answer from everybody, and then maybe discuss what we've heard in each of those, and just try and get through as many of these questions. I mean, we have 8 questions there, so it's literally about 5 minutes in each, and then come back around to what we're hearing. So what I would literally do is, like, we'll pose the first question and just get a short, clear answer from everybody on that, so that everybody gets to respond on it. And then if it's a thing that there's something that's left out or has been addressed, then we can come back around and we can also then discuss what we've heard. But if it just gets a kind of a short reaction answer rather than a long statement from everybody in each one. So on the question about you know, what purpose would a prospective member expect or hope that a representative organization might serve, what function it might serve for them? And this, I suppose, is picking up on from Carl's piece, that we really need to center this on the thinking of the prospective member, the member of the prospective member, and not make any assumptions about what we have today. So what purpose would a prospective member expect or hope from an organization that kind of does the job that we believe the PRI does at this point in time to represent them? I'll start with you, Carl, just in a bullet.
I suppose a lot of it is already covered in the note that I sent around, but essentially, you know, it's my career. How is the Institute going to help me advance my career, both in terms, you know, in terms of networking, in terms of meeting potential employers, in terms of meeting potential clients, and enabling me to develop my skills professionally. I think that like there has to be something in it for me at a personal level rather than a wide institutional level. I think that's the primary. What am I going to get out of it for my 350 quid a year or whatever it is? And it's an investment in my career primarily.
Okay, David?
Yeah, so just picking up on that, I mean, you know, I've written down here, help me to do my job better. You know, I think we're all in that thing where it's kind of, well, how do I do that? Or it's new tech or new digital or something. And I'm kind of like, I want to learn how to do that and incorporate that where I am. So, you know, things like innovation, thought leadership, staying ahead of the curve, I've written down here. You know, I think peer networking, absolutely essential. Insider knowledge, you know, I want to know what's happening in the industry, and that blends with, you know, Carl's point about opportunity, but I think it's wider than that. Like, what are the trends? What's happening in the sector? What does it mean to work in PR? Opportunity, I think absolutely. Like, you want to know that you're staying, you know, you're aware of the opportunities that come up when it comes to development, you know, and that's everything from just, that's not just like jobs and vacancies. I think it's broader. It's kind of like what type of roles are emerging in the sector at senior levels. You know, where could I be in 5 years if I went down a certain niche part of the sector? What are my peers doing? You know, and we do this all the time in the INTO. Every teacher wants to know what every other teacher is doing. They want to peer into their classroom. You know, it's the same thing. Like, you know, what are other people like me doing? And training, you know, really important, like, you know, that the training kind of almost is coming on stream at the time that these innovations and stuff are coming on stream. So it's kind of like, oh, I want to do that. Here's a training course, I can do it. Those are just some initial thoughts.
Moana?
Yeah, totally agree with David and Carl's points before. So rather than reiterating them, the only other thing that I would probably add is, you know, really being a voice of the profession for us, and not just in terms of, you know, on a public agenda, you know, if we're representing the PR industry, but also the voice of PR professionals in terms of the value that they add to a boardroom or to, you know, the strategic decision making within a company or within an organization. So for me, that's a really important part of it as well, being the voice of the profession.
Owen?
The only other things I'd add on to it, and it's kind of more the evolution of industry bodies versus clustering, is that they would hope that we'd enable some sort of collaboration or co-opetition between people, i.e. kind of growing the industry, helping to grow the industry overall in some shape or form, and then influence policy. So as a collective body that it's brought to bear to either influence policy or to help grow the industry in general.
Sinead?
Yeah, I actually would concur. I remember the reason I was thinking about this. The reason I joined the Institute all the years ago was because I was the only PR person in the company that I worked in. And I joined it for contacts, for networks, for support, for the peer networking. But I think what I would look for now is very different from what I looked for then. And I would echo what actually what everybody has said, with Carl and David in particular, and Morena's points, and Owen. I would actually echo all of that. There's nothing extra I think I can add, because my own pointers are the same, but I think it's different depending on your age and stage in your career.
Okay, Jason?
You're on mute.
Yeah, sorry. The like David, actually, I think his synopsis was just so concise and encompassed everything. It probably covers everything that we've just said. But I do agree with Sinead there. Like, one of the reasons that I actually went towards the PRI, even for the diploma or the subsequent CPD training or anything like that, was to legitimize my role within an industry that really doesn't kind of, or had traditionally did not have specific roles built in like this. You were considered a generalist in a HEO or an AP in a communications unit, but you may not have actually come from a communications or PR background. You were popped into the office and they hoped that you would actually do a good job. That's changed now, and as you can see, they've taken on, but that was the reason for me to get involved, was to legitimize the work that I was working at and the work that I had done for the previous 10 to 15 years, because I dipped my toe into comms and PR down through the last 17 or 18 years. But then I go back to what Carl and David was saying in relation to further training for networking and seeing, can the PRI offer an insight of where the industry is going? Can they see around the corner, like, what's the next new thing? Like, internal comms is a big thing now, and Martina's kind of blogged during the week and everything, but that is a legitimate post. It's getting to be a legitimate post now and referred to in the civil service, that we need an internal comms person. And I can see that the little bit that I do, give it a year or two, that will be an external position that will be offered to a person that with the specific role, with the specific skill set. So that's my take.
Very good. Florence?
I'm on mute there, apologies. I don't think I need to add anything to what everybody said. Again, just to endorse all of what everyone has covered so far. The strategic value for me is absolutely critical, as Morwenna said, and I think a couple of the rest of you. It's about where our strategic value is added to our clients, our business, our companies. That's, to me, that's really critical. And then in terms of a membership body, what we offer to our members at all stages of their career, I think that's a really key point as well that several of you made. So whether it's training or mentoring, or it's really something that helps them along, each member along their journey, wherever they are on that journey, through their career, in terms of the membership of a membership body, that it should represent all of the members, but ultimately that how we present the body itself it should be a reflection of the collective shared aspiration of the member in terms of what their role is about, and that's whether that's through how we advocate for policy, or how we talk about the profession, or kind of develop the profession, all of those things. So I think everybody between us, we've all covered all of those points in one form or another.
Okay. Aileen?
Sorry, yes, I think at the risk of being repetitive, yeah, I think, to me, I wanted access, like the others, when I joined the PRI, to an industry body that leads on and promotes best practice and standards. I need to know that I was, at the correct and best standard. I wanted to, have access to the body that is the benchmark on corporate communications and strategic communications. I want to make sure that my knowledge and skills are up to date. And like David, I want to be ahead of the curve, not behind it. Networking, career advancement, absolutely. But also on the bigger, I suppose, picture is, I think also too, that if you are a member of a strategic communications body, you as the body itself needs to have a very good profile. I think, the profile of, well, it might be the Strategic Communications Industry Association of the future, whatever we call it, but, that would actually have a very public and credible high-end position.
Okay.
And also longer-term policy, that, again, I would agree on the value of strategic communications professionals at the top table and influencing policy.
Okay. Nessa, I know you've come in in the middle of this, so what we're doing is we're going round robin. We're going through the questions and giving everybody a chance, and obviously you're coming at the end, so we'll start with you guys the next time round, or some of the next questions. But any thoughts on that question? What purpose would a prospective member expect, hope a representative organisation could serve for them?
Yeah, sorry again for being late. I was stuck on a phone call. The only thing I'd add to what I've heard everybody else saying, and maybe someone has said it before I joined, but I do think that, if you're an architect or an accountant or a solicitor, you have to be a member of your professional body to be accredited, to be actually able to practice. And I know it's a huge process and everything, but I would think it would be great if PRII membership wasn't just an option, that it was something that really you weren't seen as being a proper ethical practitioner if you were not a accredited member of the PRII. And that requires people to do CPD every few years, or a certain amount of CPD hours every year if you're an engineer or a chartered surveyor or whatever. But I do think it would definitely make somebody, if they were thinking about, will I spend the money or not on joining, it would definitely be something that, okay, I know we're not going to make it an absolute, it'll be very hard to make it that nobody can hire someone unless they're accredited, but if you could see that there was a huge value, that you're going to get more work, or you're going to be more seen as being more valuable as an employee, or somebody to be hired by a prospective client.
Okay. Yeah.
That accreditation side of it.
Okay, good. And obviously, as subsequent questions will probably develop out some of these points, but may also indeed repeat some of these things. So if they're repeating, let's not repeat it later on. Martine, any observations on what you've heard there?
So I'll try to, I mean, obviously everything that everybody said has resonated. I mean, not necessarily all of the members all of the time, but certainly all of the points made are real in terms of the question, what makes somebody join the Institute. So I'm going to focus on things that perhaps weren't mentioned. One is, and we do hear it, so it's sort of evidence-based, albeit anecdotally, is I'm joining the Institute to differentiate me from those others who don't have the educational credentials and the experiential credentials that I have, because it's not as simple as rocking up and saying, can I have membership, please? So people do use it, and they do want to have MPRII beside their name because they know it looks good on a CV. They know it looks good in terms of going for public sector contracts and such. So there's a differentiation separating me from the mass that are out there. And the other thing I would add is that absolutely, I think the first few speakers honed in on what's in it for me, and I would absolutely concur with that. There is also what's in it for the profession, in the sense that people, I think, would acknowledge that the profession of public relations, strategic communications, call it what you wish, has been tarnished in the past, either by bad behavior or perceived bad behavior. So wanting to differentiate oneself from the world of spin, from the Ab Fabs, from the Malcolm Tuckers of this world. And there is a sense that in belonging to a professional representative body, one is at least moving towards that and away from the negative stereotypes.
Okay. I think we've covered that. Is there any people feel that we've covered all the key items on that?
And Porg, I meant to, when you asked about the questions, I was thinking as well of Carl's questions, and you were asking about adding a question, and it may come up, I think, in the next area. But even before we start looking at ourselves, it's a really good time to kind of go, what can an industry body in general do that an individual can't do? Because that's essentially why industry bodies kind of come together. It's what can be done as a collective that can't be done as an individual. And maybe when we're reflecting on some of the later answers, we think about that, because if we rush into thinking about our own terrain, we'll come back with the same, I believe we'll come back with the same answers that we started off with. And we're just to reflect on why do people come together as a collective body in any shape or form? Because that, I think, might open up, things that the original genesis why people come together, and things that we forget about as you kind of move into the busy world of running an industry body.
Yeah, that's a good point, and I think it probably does come up a little bit in some of the not necessarily the next one immediately, but some of the subsequent ones, and maybe it's a good reference point to keep in mind when we do that. So
could I add to that, Porrick? Sorry,
please, yeah.
Could I add to that?
Yeah.
To expand out from Owen's point, I would take it a step further, and I'd refer you to the research paper that I did this time last year, which is to raise this question. Around the table here, with perhaps one or two exceptions, we're all old enough to recognise a profession where we did want to belong. I would question the role of representative bodies as we understand them, and question whether or not the millennials, and particularly Generation Z, who are the people we should be writing this strategy for, whether actually they recognise at all the potentiality of a representative body, and whether they would gather in a room, Zoom or otherwise, to discuss creating a representative body. So I just want to throw that out there in terms of future speak.
Well, maybe, and the next question kind of builds on that. So the question was, if the Institute didn't exist, would we collectively have a sense that there's something missing in our world? So would we want to create or set up something like the Institute? And maybe I'll start at the end. Maybe Aileen, if that's something you wouldn't mind just putting your thoughts to. If the Institute didn't exist as it currently is, would we be looking to set it up?
I would say, I think from my email, I would definitely change the name, because I think the conversation we had at the last meeting was so important that Jason, I think it was, initiated it saying, even started off saying, we're strategic communications advisors. That's what we all are, and it's true. And that, I think, is a great description, because it covers internal comms, PR, public affairs, digital. It even goes as far as marketing comms, but I'm not sure where we go with that, because I suppose you've got to draw a boundary. But again, I think that's open for discussion. So I think absolutely, yes, if I was a millennial, how old? Say if I was 30, 25, yeah, I would definitely want to belong to, because by their nature, I think, as I said, even at my speech at the AGM, the nature of this profession is that we tend to be in very small teams, if not teams of one or two. So by definition, almost, you're kind of relatively isolated, you know? So you do need, I think, a central, in this case, it would be a body, but a central something, right? That you can go to, and again, like that, saying, am I up to speed? What are other people doing? What are the trends? Am I educated enough for this? Can I network? You know, what's the future? So yes is the answer for me. I do think that if we were designing this for millennials, that a type of body or be it online or wherever, would be required.
Jason?
Yeah, I'm not too sure. I look at, go to the next person, because Aileen has just kind of sparked a few things there in relation to what she was saying in relation to changing the name and everything, and
Yeah,
I'm not too sure.
You absorb, Owen.
Yeah.
So I think if the PRI didn't exist, there's still, and you can see it in all of the other industry bodies, there is a role around ethics, standards, education, training, you know, so they'll always be there. It's kind of whether you've met them and they're kind of taken for granted is the key thing. I have a natural tendency to, at the moment, just around, and maybe it's because I'm looking at them quite a lot, around clustering and research centers and how they've kind of moved on from, you know, the already very busy role of what an industry body does. So I would think if people were, if the institute didn't exist, I think there would be a need for training, there would be a need for ethics, there would be a need for standards. I think it would, at some stage, at some age cohort within the industry, they would want that and demand it. You know, the networking part, there's so many options now that weren't there before, that it would probably be less attractive, you know, because there's so many easier ways, or ways that they can do it themselves, that before they would need an industry body to do it for them. But if they were looking at it, and I think maybe millennials, I think, would they do it, you know, where they would collaborate more together? You know, definitely the atmosphere I came from in PR, it was the black book scenario. You had black book and you never exposed anything to anyone. You never shared anything.
Yeah.
And you know, that's changed slightly, but it hasn't changed that much. And I think that that's probably where the biggest change would be, that, you know, people would have an awareness of, you know, we can grow this pie much bigger. You know, we can assume more areas so everyone gets a bigger slice. I think that would be a more attractive thing that could pull people together, because that can only be done as a group, as a collective. The other things you could do without belonging to a collective. But
Nessa?
definitely the standards and the ethics
Sorry,
would stand there.
Sorry, Nessa?
Yeah, I mean, I am confused as to whether or not the 20 plus 25-year-olds would join something, but I really agree with what Owen is saying, that there's definitely the education and training need, but otherwise I don't know that there is. I think people tend to look beyond just Ireland, so, you know, people might feel more inclined to, there's a lot of things they can access for free, and that's international. So I don't know. I'm a bit like Jason. I'm still trying to absorb everything here.
Okay,
trying
that's
to get my head into that space.
Interesting. Florence?
Just coming off mute there. I was just going to say, I think we should probably challenge ourselves a bit on the ethics standards piece. I mean, to me personally, that's critical and it's really important. And that's as much to do with the job that I do and the role that I have as to just my own values as an individual. But I wonder, particularly in the way that news and information and all that kind of thing has evolved in a not good way over the last 3 to 4 years in particular, with the way that politics has gone, with the way that news has gone, I think it's a harder space to really define yourself in. And I'm not sure, like I said, it's really important to all of us. We need to challenge ourselves a little bit on that and see what the burning platform is or what the real driver is. I think it should be core, to what we do and how we do it. But whether or not it's something that would necessarily attract members and new members and younger members to an industry body, I don't know is the honest answer on that. And maybe something a bit more, I wouldn't say self-motivated, it's not the right way to describe it, but something more focused on, again, back to kind of positioning the strategic value of the role in the organisation. And it's kind of like reputation management and risk management as much as anything else, and about having the core capability and being strategically positioned to deliver that, not as an accountant or an engineer or whatever the other key roles are in your business.
Okay.
That sounds a little bit woolly, but I just think that
let's others develop it,
to challenge ourselves on it a little bit, yeah.
Yeah. Morwenna?
Yeah. Initially, when I read it and when I was thinking about it, I think I came to the conclusion that yes, there would be a need or a want to set something up if it didn't already exist. Definitely a bit more food for thought following the conversation, but I still think if I think to my colleagues who I work with who are in the younger millennial cohort, like I think they really do see a value to it, and it does come in the form of the education, the training, the courses that they can do, the one-day workshops, things like that. And I think that they do really value that. And, you know, I know when you, like millennials, I mean, that's the continuing trend is just, you know, what more that they can get. Like they need to be provided with extra education. They need to be given that by their employers. That's what they expect. They expect there to be more added to their career path and to their learning and all of that. So I think that a body is important for them for that role. And you know, I know that I agree. Somebody said that possibly not as much for networking because there are so many other things as well. And you know, I do agree with that, but I do know again from my colleagues that, you know, there's a sense of excitement around the awards or around the conference if they're allowed to go, because tickets are in hot supply in our office, and you know, it's usually a bit of a luck of the draw who gets to get the day out of the office and into the conference, but they all want to do it, you know. So I do think there is definitely a role for it. I also, just to echo what Florence was saying, and it was something I'd written down, you know, I do think standards is absolutely at the core of what we do, but whether it needs to be our mission and our outlined like that, I'm just personally also not certain it would be the motivation to join the PRII and especially as a millennial. I think if you were looking at that and you were seeing that the mission had something to do with standards or whatever, I'm not convinced that that's the right motivation. But that's not to say that it's not at the core of everything that we do as well, but just maybe it doesn't have a place in the mission.
Okay. Sinead?
Okay, I'm going to throw a cat amongst the pigeons and I'm going to disagree with you. I look across my colleagues and I agree that education is really important, but I'm not sure they're caring where it comes from. I think it's the quality of it. Does it have to be provided by an Irish institution? I'm not sure they're caring too much. The other thing which I always bring up is that I intend to be in the workplace for the next 20 years. So, and so if you focus only on the millennials and Gen Z, you lose all the rest. And we have to keep the wider circle. It's about keeping all of us going, not just the younger ones. And funnily enough, I was thinking about that when I was positing the questions, and I started having virtual coffees with we have a lot of clerical officers, so we have a large cohort of younger people. They group together. There's a natural grouping together. There's a wanting to belong, and that's human. It's not actually age specific. They want to belong to a community. They want to be part of something they can identify with, as do us older, whatever we are. There is still that. And I would suggest, and I would posit, I can get my education from anywhere in the world right now. And I can pick and choose a lot of free really good education. Is it Irish recognised? That's another question. Absolutely, Morwena, to your point, I think like I know from talking to our guys, they expect the employer to provide them with the education and learning. I don't know they care where it comes from. I think they care more about the quality of it. I do think there is this grouping, and I'll talk about Joanne Sweeney's group as an example, where that she's creating a community. And now, okay, it's not Irish specific, but she has put together a large group of young Gen Z and Gen X people who are linking in with her, and they are creating groups, and they're still creating LinkedIn groups, and they're creating. So there is a natural human thing to want to be part of your own community, if that isn't provided. And I know it's interesting, Nessa, Marina, you've talked about loads of other opportunities for networking. I don't. In my environment, I don't have a huge environment of, unless I pay for personally pay for others. And I probably would, I pick the PRII over others. So as an example, but I did have a chat with the guys, and they're not, none of them are communication, sorry, 2 out of a group of, 16 are communications people. And I chatted to them about, would you join? And they all said, back to Carl's original point, depends on what's in it for me, but none of them said standards or ethics or education, funnily enough. Okay. It was about the professional voice and community piece. So that's just an interesting counterpoint.
David?
Yeah, so just a couple of quick ideas, and I try not to repeat what other people have said. I think there's something really there in the ethics and the values, and what really immediately comes to mind when I've been listening to the conversation is I used to work for Recruitment and Employment Confederation, and this idea of rogue operators in the space damaging what it means to work in that space, and everybody getting tarred with the same brush, and having a body that kind of, you know, pushes back on that. And to, you know, to Martina's point around spin and that narrative that, you know, all comms is spin. You know, I think there is definitely something there that would be missing if the PRI didn't exist. I have to say, I feel like the PR industry would be devalued if there wasn't a professional body like the PRI in this space, and if it was just kind of clusters of training and conference providers and networking opportunities. But the other thing that jumped out just from listening to the conversation here, and it wasn't in my initial notes, was when did I start to think that I worked in the PR industry? And actually, I never felt that I was part of an industry for probably my first 10 years. And it was probably only when I started to have a strategic role and I had to defend the function that I started to really associate with the industry. Now, obviously, I've had blended roles and everything, as people will know. But I suppose what I'm thinking is, you know, just to that point around how you attract younger members, is it a bit of kind of, do we have to mix that up a little bit? Do we connect with younger people when it comes to training? But then do they go away and they get busy getting real life experience or getting, you know, just kind of busy with life, and they come back when they get that strategic role or when they're at a certain point in their career? Do we have to be honest about that gap? And I say that, you know, I lead a large team, and, you know, it was a struggle to get two of 15 to sign up to become members of the PRI and to do the training. And obviously they love it and they found the courses to be incredible, but for most people, they just don't identify. They do comms work day in, day out. They'll never identify as PR because they've been generalists throughout their career. The thing about networking conferences, you know, I mean, absolutely. I mean, I think networking is really key. I mean, I think it'd be really hard in some sectors, and I'm thinking of other jobs that I've had, to convince somebody that it's worthwhile getting money to go to a networking event. But I can justify a professional association. And I kind of, when I'm justifying that, I'm thinking about the access to networking and peer networks and everything else. So I think that needs to be really a part of it. And I think that's something that will be missing. But look, I don't want to go on. A lot of the points that I've met already, you know, I wholeheartedly agree with. Thanks.
Okay, Carl just jumped. There's
You can hear me okay, yeah?
Yeah, we can, yeah. Sorry, you just moved on my screen. I didn't see an instance. Sorry about that. I
suppose I'm going to just avoid answering that question again, if you don't mind.
That's okay, yeah.
I don't know what the future, I don't know. I can't predict what would or wouldn't happen. But just a lot of the points are, we're talking here about what members might want and Gen Zs and millennials might want. I just think that I keep going back to what's in it for me as a member and what am I going to get, you know, and a lot of the things that were spoken about here are standards, ethic, education, training. They're going to fall out of what we set as our mission. So if we say that we are going to enable public relations and communications practitioners to be the best they can be. They're not the words, but okay, what do we then have to do in order to deliver on that? I think we don't want to get caught up in that layer down in actually the tools of delivery rather than deciding on what we're here to do. Because I think we're just sidestepping that mission.
Yeah.
What is the Institute? Why does Martina and Frank and Anne-Marie, why do they get up out of bed and come to work, right? What is their job? What are they supposed to be doing? It's not just standards, it's not just ethics, it's not just training. It's, you know, they're all part of it, but it's what point do they all come up to? And I think that's what we have to get clear in our head, because that gives guidance for us as a council in decisions to say, okay, we're about to make a decision on something. Does that point directly up to what we're here supposed to be doing, which is to enable members, and members in the broadest sense? And I think Sinead's point is very important, that it's members from students to the old grey-haired among us. Do you know what I mean? There has to be something in it for everybody. And for the older group, it can be actually, what can be in it for them is giving back to the younger group. You know, so there's a lot of different ways. So, but if we keep focusing on how can we make members better in the delivery of their profession? How can we make them be better?
And it seems to me, you know, skipping down through the questions, because not some of the questions we'd end up going over the same ground again. But the one of the questions down there towards the bottom was, you know, does what the institute does, or can what the institute does make the member better in their work? Is that ultimately what it's around? It's making the member better in their work, and then, you know, making their work something that is valued by others.
You see, a lot of the points that were made here about people feeling, like Jason's point, where I think it was Jason who said that people feel that their work gets recognition and endorsement if they're a member of an institute. That's part of it. And we have to be a high quality, delivering standards, ethics, in order for it to actually have currency. So they all flow up to that idea that we're delivering a service to members, as opposed to just doing a whole load of things that we think an institute should do.
Would others have a similar feeling on that? Morwenna?
Sorry, can I just start? I'm really sorry for... Sorry, go on, Moana.
Yeah,
go on, Carl, finish.
Just in terms of the name change, I think that's for another day. If that helps to serve the mission, then it's a conversation. But we have to just be clear on what the mission is first. That's what my view on that would be.
Yeah, no, I think I would happily hold that thought.
Yeah, I'd agree as well. We can't be trying to do everything in one go. That's a whole philosophical discussion.
Morwenna?
Yeah, I've lost my train of thought. Sorry.
Okay, but ultimately I was thinking, does what the institute does that, is it about making members better in their work? Is that the point?
Yeah, I do agree with that, and I think that is a fundamental part of it, but I still always come back to a bigger picture as well, and in that I think that the institute has to represent the professionals and the profession as a whole. And like for me, I think there has to be a value placed on the profession amongst people outside the profession. So the CEOs, CFOs, they start seeing the value in their communications teams, and they want to start adding a CMO or CCO, should I say, Chief Communications Officer to their board. Like, that's what I think is really, really crucial. And then in turn, it's also then crucial that it makes our members better at their jobs so that they can strive to be sitting on boards around the country as the Chief Communications Officer.
Okay.
Sorry, Roger, can I just add something there? Sorry,
please, yeah, Aileen, go on.
I sent the email with the change of name of the body, so I do apologize. I had no time actually, because I meant to put the top. Sorry about putting the name of the bloody, industry body for. Obviously,
don't worry about that.
Vision are more important. I'm sorry, I was just under so much pressure, but it had struck me last week, so I just had that name in my head. So sorry about that.
No problem. We will come to it. No issue.
It's obviously not top of the agenda. Sorry, just one thing I would like to add is that while obviously the industry body has to be good for its members, I also think there is that bigger piece, which is why are we as members, what do we do that brings value, not only to our organization, but to our communities, to customers, to society as a whole. In other words, why would you have a CCO on a board, except that, you know what I mean, that part of the business is adding immense value to not only the company, its customers, but also to, you know, the kind of triple P idea, you know, that you've got profit, people, planet, that we're getting into. There has to be something about, you know, sustainability, ESG to me in there, that you're benefiting multi, you know, sort of stakeholders, not just, you know, there has to be a bigger picture on it.
Okay. Yeah. Sinead?
Yeah, I like that. And I like the point, actually, Carl's point about reflecting. I mean, the mission is, what's our ultimate vision? If we could create our perfect, our absolutely perfect, whatever it is, what is that? So, you know, if Nike's mission is to, you know, make people live better lives or whatever it is, what is our ultimate? And that's an interesting question to pose. So yes, I think the ultimate goal, if you were asking me, doing the reversal of looking back in 20 years and describing the whatever it's named, but let's call it PRI for now, I do think it's about supporting people to be the best they can be in the profession, and supporting recognition to that COO, so that COO kind of whatever it is becomes a destination point. It becomes or the equivalent in agency or whatever. But I do think there's an interesting, if the faraway vision is to achieve that, then stepping back will be a very interesting journey as to how we get about it. But I think it's two parts. To Carl's part about, or whoever said it, supporting PR people to be the best they can be, and supporting the recognition of what that is.
Jason? You're on mute.
Apologies.
So your perfect thoughts are still there, hopefully.
Look, to go back to the second question very quickly, I don't think millennials would set it up as it is. I think you'd actually have to wait for them to be in the industry for 10 or 15 years to set up a professional body as it is run at the moment. But I think, you know, to try and encompass what everyone has kind of said there, you have to be with everyone at every step of their career and their professional life. And how do we do that? You nearly want to steal the kind of tagline of a marketing campaign for a mortgage, like we'll be with you with every step. And I think that's the key to any kind of professional body. You have to set a standard of ethics and standards for it to be legitimate and to be recognized by organizations and individuals, and to get those CCO roles. But also you have to be able to nourish those millennials that start their career, that they're 2 years in and they don't know if it's a PR job or it's a career for them, and kind of work their way up the ladder to those huge head of communications positions or whatever. And how we find a balance all through their career to do that, and how we as a professional body can do that. I think what we need to do, and I think we discussed this last week, Martina would have brought it up, like the definition of what the PRI is about. It's not just PR people, it's communications people, it's internal comms people, because all those little tiny facets that would have been part of a public relations officer's job 20 years ago has now broken into industries of their own. And because of that, we need to be able to encompass that it's not just a professional body for PROs, but it's a professional body for, you know, junior executive communications officers, or civil service head of communications, or the CCOs, or the social media manager, or whatever. And like, yeah, that means you have a huge net to throw out there. But I think we should be able to, like, if you drill down really, you know, put it under one umbrella, all those kind of social media and internal comms bits feed into your public relations and your communications of any organization. And trying to encompass all of that, it's going to be hard. It's going to be very hard to try and get that into a mission statement of 5 sentences. But yeah, that's my random thought on that now.
Okay. Okay. Does anybody else want to come in on this idea of, like, you know, does what this institute does, or does what an organization like this does or should do, make members better in their work? Owen or Nessa, Florence?
Can I just make it? It's still, and you're probably going to
I'll come back to David. Yeah, go on, Owen.
You're probably going to kick me. Sorry, David, I couldn't hear you there. Like to me, it's still a fundamental question of, like, why do people come together? Like, why would you come together in any sort of organization? What is it? Is it around, you know, what the collective can do that the individual can't? Like, there's a real fundamental question there, which I think will inform us, because we're in danger of just rushing to the end point of what things we need to be doing. I'm still a bit unclear. I think it's still worth asking the question of, like, why would people come together in the first place? You know, and strip out that it's you know, around the public relations industry in general. Why do industry associations happen? Why would people come together to collect the resources and pay time, energy? Like, what are we hoping to achieve, and why do they need to do it? Why can't they do it by themselves? You know, a lot of it can be done by private contractors in providing those individual things, which have been covered already. Like, is it the power of the collective? Is that the single biggest reason why industry bodies happen in the first place? Because I think if we explore that a little bit, and we probably will, and just feel that in this conversation we're in danger of jumping to the solution that we want for the public relations institute and trying to change that and not change that it's, you know, back to the fundamentals of why does it happen? What's in our psyche? What's in the need that's there that happened, that makes us happen or not? And then we start to get to is that relevant now? And is that what we're currently doing, or are we, you know, delivering on something that was decades ago and it's still relevant? But I think if you get an answer to that question, maybe it's too philosophical.
David, you were coming in there. Sorry about that.
Yeah, no, just to be really brief, no, I mean, I think it is about that, you know, that's definitely a part of it, but I think it's also about the showcasing and the promoting and actually placing a value on that. I think that's really important. You know, when you think about sort of people making a pitch to get more training or whatever else, there needs to be a sense of value. Just something that popped out from the discussion that we're having, and I just thought I'd throw it in, even though it's not necessarily tied to this question, but I'm conscious we're being recorded. Like just a random thought, explainer video. Like, there's so many different components to what it means to work in communications right now. Is there a way that we could help educate and inform the public about that in some really nifty, you know, sort of way? Because, you know, I think a lot of people learn about it, and just when I think about something members can get that they can share, this is what it means to work in PR. Sorry, just a random thought, but I said I'd say it while I had it. Yeah,
good for that, good for that. Florence, Nessa, any thoughts on this thing about, does it make us better in their work? Does it make people better in their work? Is that part of the mission?
I think,
go ahead, Nessa.
Yeah, I think, look, I think a lot of it comes down to what's in it for me, if I'm going to join as a member, or if I'm trying to get my employer to pay for my membership, or I'm trying to justify paying for it myself as a sole trader or as a member. And I think that it comes back to my earlier contribution about this sort of requirement that to be seen as being, I certainly would have, when I joined 20 years ago or whenever it was, I would have seen it as, you know, I had really made it now that I was accepted as a full member of the PRII. And I think that therefore it helped me to do my job, because it opened me up to a network of other professionals and awareness of courses, and even just the lunchtime lectures that used to be on, that I used to go to a lot when I was younger. So it definitely did help me to do my job better. And that's why I would be worried that with so much free stuff. And, you know, 20 years ago when I joined, you didn't have the internet, and it was very much an Irish network. But now we can all join different networks all over the world. So that would be my worry, that yes, it helps me to do my job, but there's loads of other services and tools that I can access that will provide similar and more help for me to do my job than I just get from PRII if I was a much younger member.
Okay, Florence,
yeah, I think I would just add to that by saying that, and it's really just joining the dots of what everybody has said so far. Like, ultimately, I think the what's in it for me question is critical, and it's not just from a self-motivated point of view, but the goals and aspirations of the organisation have to align with the goals and aspirations of the members and the individual, kind of regardless of what career they're in. So in terms of me as a communications professional starting out, say I was an accountant starting out and I'm joining an accountancy membership body, or maybe take a different example because that's one that maybe needs to be accredited, but our goals have to align with what somebody's overall career aspiration or goal or their professional aspiration would be. So it's not just unique. There are certain things that we talked about earlier, like professional standards and ethics and those kinds of things that to us are core to our values. And there will be things that are unique to communications, but there are things that should be common as well to all membership bodies. Back to Owen's point, which is, why do people come together in the first instance? What is that critical mass about? What does it offer? What are the benefits of a collective resource, or a pooling of resources, or a critical mass that's greater than the sum of its parts? That's kind of what we have to identify for the body first, but then separately unique to the profession. So it's really just what everybody else said as well, just looking at it from a slightly different perspective.
so could I just, in response to the point that's been made and it's been picked up a few times here, so would people generally feel that the concept of some sort of the gathering factor, for want of a better way of putting it, or the collective factor, or the sense of being part of a body of people, Davis mentioned it, Carl's mentioned it, you've mentioned it, Owen's mentioned it, that sense of being collectively part of something, even if, to Jason's point, both the last day and tonight, we need to consider what that is and define it and think it out a little bit. But that sense of...
Could I just make a point there, Porrick? Sorry for cutting
Come on, that's exactly, I'm inviting the point, so you come on, yeah.
I just think what's emerging is looking at what we can do for members and what we can give them and to answer that question and what's in it for me. And then on Owen's point, it is the group. What the group can do is advocate for the profession. So the delivery of our mission is operating at two levels. It's operating at the individual level. So we're enabling people to be better in their jobs and their careers. And I'm not sure about, I know we'd have to be very cognizant of it, but the competition of training and networking that's available. You know, Ireland's a village, and you know, the networking is so important, and it's kind of unique, and that's one of our unique qualities. So we can provide services at an individual level, and then also advocate for the profession that I am working in, to make me feel that there is somebody out there doing something that I can't do as an individual, but they're doing it as a group level, which is to Owen's point. So I think we should think about weaving the member, individual, and then advocating as a group. You've
summed it up very well, because I was going to ask the question, is that's what I was hearing, but I just wanted to sense, do others agree with that? And I guess we're an hour in now, and we said we'd be an hour. If we're okay, I was going to do two things. First of all, can I ask for another 10, well, say 15 minutes at the most? And then I think we should cut it. And secondly, what I was going to suggest we do, we've covered 3 questions of 8, but they've cut across them all. I let you all, I'm going to ask Martina just for her perspectives, because she's been listening to all of this. And then I'd like others to maybe just say, pick out, without, and try not, again, to repeat what you've said already, or indeed for others to say, but just if you're to pick out 2 or 3 words or thematic points that you've heard in the last hour that you think we need to be focusing around? I obviously have notes here and we'll be able to go back on the recording, but what we might do is go back around and again, just to say to everybody, from what you've heard now in the last hour, what are the two, you know, in terms of what is our purpose, you know, can you pick something out about that? But before we ask you to do that, Martina, have you any observations on the things you've heard in terms of, you know, you've probably thought about this, you know, more on a day in, day out basis than anybody else, because you're carrying it every day. Are we missing anything from what you currently hearing or seeing from the community that we're serving, whether we're serving it well or otherwise, or whether they all recognize it or otherwise? Has this conversation, broadly speaking, at some level covered all of the things you're hearing about, or is there anything that we're not touching on?
I'll mention two things. One is from conversations that have taken place on emails and such, and today, I think we would all admit that the word standards is as about exciting as fungal toe infection. And one of the difficulties,
tasty, Martina, tasty.
Yeah, TMI.
But no, but you're asking me what I struggle with. I struggle with words like standards and ethics causing widespread insomnia. And yet, this is one of the most important things collectively that an institute can do. Because a member can't wander around waving a card going, look at the code of ethics that I've signed up to. I'm the best. You know, you can trust me. I'm reliable. But it needs a collective or a representational body, whichever you prefer, to bring that together, to get people to sign up. As members, you sign up to those codes of practice. As members signed up to those codes of practice, I can then use that to defend our members against, I think David mentioned, those others that are necessarily engaged in practices we would not condone, and we would not allow them either into our membership, and we would not keep them within our membership if that was their practices. So while standards and codes are very unexciting, they are, to my mind, critically important in the future of the reputation of the profession. If we were a group of dentists or chiropodists, we would not be having to have a conversation around ethics. It would be taken for granted. But as members of the public profession, public relations profession, and this has been going on since I joined 1,000 years ago, we have to accept our profession is not highly regarded, or certainly not as highly regarded. And one of the phrases that I have, to quote myself, banged on about for the last 3 years is a word that has been missing from tonight. I'd like to put it on the table, and that is the word contribution. The contribution that the profession of public relations and communications makes to the economic, to the social, to the cultural, and to the political life in this state. That's the message we need to be getting across, regardless of whether you're in internal comms, or you're in public affairs, or you're in strategic communication. So the individual member can bang on about that in their own team meeting and in their own boardroom. It takes the collective to bang on about that on the national stage. So I'd like to see the word contribution of the profession somewhere being represented within, if there is a new mission statement.
Okay. So picking up then on and we've gone around it now, can I just ask everybody for three words that strike them, and we're focusing here on the purpose and the mission of the organization. 3 words now based on, if we've all heard quite a number of contributions. The time has been full. I don't know if we feel it's you know, but 3 words that just sum up what you believe should be at the heart of the mission as it stands now. And we'll obviously parse this out and go back and write it up. And actually, just as I say, Owen made the point to me in advance of today, I recall writing up notes from a session we had last year, but do you think I could find them in advance of today? But we will. I do have the original notes, so we might bring those together as well. But for today, the three around purpose, around the mission of this organization, what are the three words that are now top of mind based on what we've heard in the last hour?
You want me to kick off there?
Well, I was going to ask for a volunteer. I was waiting for a volunteer, or then I was going to pick on somebody. So you've just saved somebody who's in my eye line.
It's one of the disadvantages of having an A at the start of your name. You're always at the top of the class for volunteers.
Yeah, but but then again, you see, you can get in early and you're not stuck at the end of the line.
Yeah, you can have a quick lunch, early lunch. Just quickly, members, advocate, and to Martina's point, in contribution. I think all the issues in terms of standards, ethics, they'll be front and center of how we actually deliver on the top three, which is for members, how we advocate for the profession, and how we highlight the contribution the profession makes. Thanks, Borek.
Nessa?
Can I offer experts? Because everybody, because they watch the news or read the news, thinks they're an expert in communications. Whereas if you're a public relations professional, you're an expert communications expert. Community is another really important one, I think. The ethics and standards were big ones for me. Education and training, being up to date. So I think we need to somehow get across the fact that being part of the institute means you're all the time going to be enhancing your knowledge and staying current and up to date.
So up to date would be the...
Yeah, it's the education and training side. That's the more current and up to date, because that's where I think we need to push it, that it's not just the young people, it's every age. We need to stay current and up to date. Expert and community.
I'll go to Ailey next, and then I'll go to Morwenna.
Yeah, I like experts from Nessa very much, educated constantly. And I'm with Martina on the contribution. I was just describing as beneficial, but I do think we have to be the people who explain how our company or organization benefits, customer, consumer society. Yep.
Morwenna next, and then Sinead.
Yeah, so community was on my list, definitely. Voice or advocate, definitely, as well, as another one. Empower, in terms of empowering our members to do the best they can in their jobs. And then not necessarily one for the mission statement, but something else that kind of struck me was inclusive, inclusive of all members, be they millennials or grey hairs or in-house, internal, whatever it is, but inclusive. And just to echo, I really agree with the Martina's one on contribution and Nessa's expert as well. So I'm adding about 6 to the list there.
That's okay. Sinead, and then I'll go to Jason.
Oh yeah, sorry, by the way, I'm plugged in my phone, so I can't look at you and plug it in at the same time. So hence the top of my head. I had community as well. The other word I would have is collective, and the other word I had is voice. But I think voice is advocate as well from that point of view. And the other word that came to mind is support. But that is the contribution piece, and to be the best you can be. Supported, actually, I suppose. Supported. They're the words that I would add.
Jason, and then I go to David.
Yeah, support was on the top of my list. Professionalism was the second word. And I don't know if I have a word for this, but I'll give you the concept of what I was trying to come up with. And it was more like, one member has one voice, one vote, and it's kind of tying into what Owen and David was discussing earlier in relation to the collective, why does a group come together? How does a union form? How do we vote a TD into the Dáil? We come together with one voice or one vote, and we put a person in place to speak on behalf or to lobby on behalf of us. So is that somewhat of an element of what we do? Because we might have one vote at the AGM, or we might have a voice and we might voice our opinion, but the PRII is there to actually make sure we're heard and listens. So that's, again, going along with Mowena's, I've added about 20 and 2, so about 22 there.
Very good. So David, and then I'll go to Florence.
Thanks. So what jumps out for me is one of the things I said right at the beginning, which is staying ahead of the curve. I think, education, training is important, but it's how you stay on top of that. And I think that blends really nicely with ethics and values and sort of professionalism. Second one that comes to mind, just jumps out from our conversation, is professional community and what it means to be a member of it, but also I'd actually throw another word in there, and that's diversity, a diverse professional community. And that's not just about the diverse spectrums within our community, it's who the people in the community are as well. I think that's important. And then the final one is just, and I wrote it down actually twice, I forgot it on a separate page, but being confident about who we are, so that when people join it, they know what it means to work in PR. Like, as in, when you think about a recruiter, you don't think about, oh, there's exec search, there's there's the day traders, there's all these different things. You know exactly what a recruiter is. It's simple, it's confident, everybody knows what it is. And I think as much as there's huge new areas emerging within our sector, we need to be really confident about what it means. And I think that's the perfect place to elaborate on that and come up with a way of explaining that and capturing that is the mission statement. Thanks.
Okay, Florence.
Sorry, just coming off mute. I tried to stick to 3 words, but I managed to stick to 3 themes, if that counts.
Okay, yeah.
So the first one really is I use the word strategic. So it's around our collective strategic value, back to the point I was making in the organizations that we work for or represent. So that our skill is a strategic skill. So that's the first thing. The second one, and this is probably an amalgamation of a couple of the points that most people have made, it's around expertise and capability. And I think potentially the standards piece could be part of this, that it's inherent that we have a collective expertise and capability that's about being professional, about being expert, about being a core knowledge capability. As Nessa said, everyone thinks they understand comms until they actually have to try and do it. So something around expertise and capability. And then the third piece, which I think covers a couple of the things we talked about, the third theme is the collective one, around a community of practice, around a community of excellence, and around about the membership body or the collective membership being advocates for the profession and for the skills and the strategic value that we add. So strategic, and then expertise, capability, and then something around collective or community would be kind of the 3 themes that I would focus on.
Owen?
Sorry, I don't think I've ever heard that phone ring before. There's only one person who got the number, so you'll have to forgive it. So first was affinity / belonging, which I think are really, really important. They kind of come up in different guises. The second one is around harnessing potential. And then that just led me into one kind of thematic things, which one is, I think an analogy will really help us. Is an orchestra, jazz session, are we director of it? But what analogy would work? And just the last thing that just struck me was, like, why is it so hard, for the public relations institute, for the public relations sector? What makes it challenging and more difficult? Because I think that kind of can explain an awful lot of it, even if articulated at some stage. I have my own viewpoints on why the PR industry is so much more difficult than other industries, because it's multifaceted. I think affinity and harnessing potential would be the main ones.
Okay, Martina, do you want to respond to any of that or add anything? Or?
No, I think there's some really good words there. I suppose the difficulty is pulling it back down to mission, and my view of mission as I would have understood it and worked on it in the past is that it needs to be reflective, yes, but it needs to be aspirational. It's not something, to use a phrase that was used earlier, it's not something that we're going to achieve on year X or year Y. It's something we should always be striving for, getting better at. So I suppose just, to allow ourselves in the discussion around the mission to be aspirational. When we come down to the harder brass tacks of the developing the strategy and boring down into tactics, then we can deal with some of the more closer realities close to home. But let's allow ourselves an opportunity to dream and aspire as well.
Okay, so would it be fair to say, based on this conversation, indeed, probably the premise for this conversation was that, sorry, did I cut off somebody there? Apologies. No, sorry. That the premise for this was that there was a general sense that the mission as presented in the presentation at the last council meeting was probably a bit, that thing of promoting standards and all that kind of stuff probably didn't quite capture the essence of what people felt in their hearts is or should be the mission. This conversation, has, and we've heard themes come out through it, and you've all given me a summary here. It's not it doesn't arrive at a point just yet, but it gives some raw material. So if I were to try and take this back and distill this back into something that is in other words, try and capture a definition or a sense of, definition sounds too precise, but capture a sense of in a paragraph or two, to the extent that that is possible, the best version I can of what I've heard today, and share that back, and that we can take our next steps from there. So whether we need to refine that, either in some sort of an exercise, or whether we can then move on to some of the subsequent questions about how we would go about that and what that means in terms of actions and strategies, etc. Are people comfortable with that as a pathway?
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Super. I'm happy to give you a hand with that, Pádraig, if you want to.
I would certainly take you up on that, Carl. And Aoibhinn, in apologising for her absence today, has also volunteered herself in that way. And if there's anybody else that wants to volunteer, you don't have to do it instantly. But look, we'll be taking input from everybody anyway. But I would welcome input from if anybody wants to volunteer for a shortlisting. With Carl and Aoibhinn and I, that just come back to me an email. I'm not going to ask anybody to do it here in front of us.
Thanks very much.
Say that again.
Sorry, when's the next meeting, or when are we meeting next?
Well, the next council meeting is until the first week of September, I think, Martine, isn't it? Or maybe off the top of my head, I'm not sure the date. The 1st of September is on a Tuesday, so I think it's the 10th, Thursday the 10th.
I think it's the 10th.
Yeah.
It's certainly it's the first week of September anyway.
Yeah, it's the first very early September. But
Pádraig, I'm volunteering.
Sorry, say that again.
I'm volunteering to help you.
Thank you, Aoibhinn. Thank you. Okay, so what we'll do is I will do that. I'll get cracking on that, and I'll have something to you guys early next week, early to mid next week, I'd say, probably, to be fair. I think we need to keep a little bit of momentum in this now.
Yeah, I agree.
Agreed.
Okay.
Thanks very much.
And can I just before we wrap up, just the danger this is going to be we rush into writing words and trying to re-script, because we can't kind of stay at a high level all the time either. But I think it's still well worth wallowing a little bit in the why, and only because it's going to point us the direction of what the real potential of getting a load of people, what the potential of the collective is. Because otherwise we'll end up, if we go and rush into words, we'll end up with the same words again, rather than what's the true potential of having the collective working together.
Yeah.
And even if that's just 5 bullet points at the very, very top, so when we get down and we're looking at the words, kind of, actually, are we harnessing that potential by doing this? Or are we just kind of rushing into the standard stuff that, should be done as a compliance almost? So I wouldn't do it in the whole session, but it should be jotted down as 4 bullet points of, remember, collective, this is what it kind of does. Are we doing that, or are we drifting off into, the areas that we're more comfortable with? So.
Yeah, well, I think, maybe I hope I'm interpreting it correctly, is I don't think we charge on to the next stage until we've exhausted ourselves on this one, and I don't think we've exhausted ourselves on this one yet.
No.
Even though it might feel a bit stodgy to be here, but I think we have to.
No, I think it's a great session. I think it's been very good.
That was a great session, Pádraig.
Could I just
really good.
Carl, yeah.
That we give ourselves a little bit of flexibility in that if we work up, similar to what Owen was saying, if we work up a draft, that we don't see that over the weeks as immovable, right? So as the process goes on, maybe we'll come back and visit it fresh in 3, 4, 5 weeks and say, well, actually, we need to tweak that a little bit. So, I wouldn't see that we're trying to aim for perfection in the mission. but it's really just to get us through the next stage and then the next stage, and then we look at it all in the round.
I'm totally comfortable with that. Is everybody else good with that?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Great,
Okay.
thank you.
Thanks very much, everybody.
Bye, Corey.
Okay.
Bye,
Yeah,
everybody.
Yeah, be in touch. Thank you
you.
all.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye, Borg.